A Glitch at the Park, translated by J Nightmares. This happened when I went to a theme park in Nagasaki with 3 friends. The sun set in the blink of an eye, and we were having a great time riding on various attractions, eating, and enjoying the illumination lights. It had rained and it was a little damp, but overall, it was great. We moved towards an attraction inside a palace, and there was a huge line of people waiting to get in. Since I guess we would be waiting for a while, I took the chance to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, I couldn't find my friends anywhere since the line of people seemed to have doubled. I called one of my friends, and they answered straight away. "Sorry, where are you guys?" I heard my friend's side of the call, and it sounded really noisy, like they were in a crowd of people. "Can you raise your arm so we can see you?" I asked. "Yes, come find us," she replied through the intermittent static. I hung up, and I tried to find a bit of free space in the crowd to make it easier for my friends to find me. However, I didn't see any of my friends or any arms up in the air. I gave them a call back and said, "Hey, sorry, I can't find you yet. Have you still got your arm up?" There in the crowd, I saw an arm raise up. I pushed through the crowd to get to them, but when I reached the place I thought they were, I couldn't find them. Someone else had their arm up. I was about to call them back when I saw someone with their arm up in the small grove of trees behind the crowd. I wondered as I grew closer to them on why they had chosen such a strange place to wait for me. I saw my 3 friends beckoning to me in the wooded area. I started to speed up to reach them since they were receding into the tree line. And just as I was about to start jogging, I felt a hand land on my shoulder. "Where are you going?" one of my friends asked. "Where have you been?" she asked. I didn't know what was happening. They had just been waving me over to the trees, yet now they were in front of me. I turned back to the trees and there was no one there. I told my friends about what I had just experienced, and I pointed out that I have even spoken with one of them over the phone. But they just stared at me confused and showed me their call history. If I hadn't spoken with any of them, then who did I speak to? And who were the people calling me into the woods? I was so confused, I couldn't enjoy the rest of our time at the theme park. I couldn't get what had just happened out of my head. Since the park was so big, we decided to take a boat ride back to the entrance. Taking in some of the illumination and scenery should have calmed me down a bit. But it didn't. Something else happened. As we were down the canal in our boat, there was a bridge up ahead, and there were 4 figures stood on the bridge. I can remember it so clearly. I saw all 4 of us on that bridge. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I turned to my friends to see if they were shocked as I was, but it was as if they couldn't see them. I looked back at them on the bridge. This time, I couldn't turn away. I felt as if I was frozen in time. Those doppelgangers stared back at me and grinned. Our boat went under the bridge, and I turned to get another look at them, but when we came out the other side, they had disappeared. I have no idea if this was some sort of glitch in the Matrix, or if I was looking into a parallel universe or something. I just remember how horrifying the whole experience was to me. It was uncanny, and I often see those doppelgangers when I shut my eyes. Was something calling me? I will update if anything else happens.
I remember it was snowing heavily when it happened. I was on my way home from work. I got off the train at my station. In front of the station, there were shopping malls. Usually this time of night it would be busy with people, but because of the snow, it was completely deserted. It looked magical, pure, untouched white snow, as far as the eye could see. I usually caught the bus home. I was waiting at the stop and not a single bus showed up. Not even a person went by. It must have been the snow's fault. I thought about walking home. I didn't want to, but I figured I might get home quicker rather than waiting around to see if a bus would ever turn up. I put up my umbrella and I started trudging through the knee-high snow. I started to enjoy my walk after a little while. I pushed the snow off a fence. That was really satisfying. And I picked up a stick and drew some things in the snow. It was like a winter wonderland that I had all to myself. I hadn't seen snow like that for years. I walked on a little further, and I don't know how to describe it, but something just felt off. It was like the atmosphere changed. It was silent, the winter chill lifted, and it felt like my ears were blocked. You know that feeling when you're on a flight and you can't hear for a while? Well, it was like that. I noticed a huge Western-style building that I hadn't seen before. I was sure I was walking in the right direction, in a straight line back home, a route that I was more than familiar with. Why was this building here? Was it built recently? I wondered. I ignored it, and kept walking through the snow. No matter how far I walked, I couldn't see anything familiar. I started to get irritated with myself for taking a wrong turn, because somehow I had gotten lost. After about 30 minutes or so, I had no choice but to call home. I told my husband the situation, and he made fun of me a bit for getting lost on a route I have walked so often. I expected that, to be honest.
"Where are you? I'll come get you,"
he said. If I knew where I was, I wouldn't be lost now, would I said.
Is there a vending machine nearby?"
he asked. Yeah, there is, I replied.
"Yeah, that vending machine will have an address on it."
Good thinking. I told him the address of where I was.
"Get yourself a hot drink and wait somewhere with some shelter, and I'll be there as soon as I can. I'll call you when I'm nearby,"
he said, and he hung up the phone. The vending machine didn't have a hot drink selection, so I had to get a cola. Then I went off in search of somewhere to sit out of the snow. I walked along, and every house I passed was made of wood. Have I ended up in a kind of old-style town or something? I came across a park and found a bench. I pushed the snow off and sat down. I looked up, and the snow was falling. The sky looked like a floral pattern that was falling down to earth. It was gorgeous. After about 10 minutes, I got tired of waiting, and I called my husband.
"Hey, where are you?"
he asked. On a park bench, I said.
"Right. Well, cut through the park and go out the opposite road, then turn right. And don't hang up, okay?"
Turn right?
"Yeah, when you can see the third house on the right, just walk up and open the door."
The hell are you talking about? I'm not going to walk into some stranger's house, I said.
"Just trust me on this one, please do it."
I walked up to the door and opened it and walked in. A lady I had never seen before was stood in the hall. I turned back, about to apologize, and I was looking at my own front door. She was gone. The address that I had read from the vending machine was an address from 20 years ago. The park that I had sat in was now a parking lot. My husband was born and raised in the area, so he remembered the way home from back then. I couldn't recognize my own home when it was right in front of my eyes. I guess this could be seen as a kind of funny story, since it's so strange that I managed to get lost on a route I was so familiar with. But it's not funny to me. When I think back to it, I get a cold sweat. I don't know how it happened or where I went, but it was so strange. It was beautiful, but I'm so glad I could get back.
Ghost or glitch? locked out by a strange sleeping bag figure in the mountains. By u/cocoa leaves. So a couple years ago, I went on a hiking trip to a mountain in East Africa with some friends and guides. After reaching the peak in the morning, it took us all day to get halfway back down, so we stopped for a camp at nearly midnight. I was sharing the room with a friend and a guide who had broken a leg and was brought in on a stretcher and was laying on her bed. There were 3 beds positioned, left, center, right, and the guide was on the right bed. My friend and I left to freshen up, leaving the guide half asleep on her bed. Upon our return, we find out that our cabin door is locked, which was broken earlier. The guide had shifted to the center of the bed, and there was someone else sleeping in her bed, huddled in a pink sleeping bag. We could actually see through the window. We knocked, and no response. We kept knocking for the next 2 hours, pausing to take a walk and look for help in between. And it was midnight, so no one was really around. And still, nothing. They were both like logs. We come back from one of our walks to find out that the pink sleeping bag figure is gone, and the guide is back on her right bed. We knocked and yelled, and this time, she woke up, annoyed, and telling us to get in already. We tried the door and it was unlocked. We checked and the lock was broken. We asked her who the other person was, and she had no idea what we were talking about. She said that she never even moved an inch. Even when we asked in the morning, she didn't recall a thing. What do I make of this?
This summer, I saw my brother's doppelganger. My brother's a tall and lanky kind of guy, a bit on the bony side too. His frame is pretty easily recognizable in a crowd. Another odd thing about him is he walks very purposely, as if he's always late for something. I saw my brother's doppelganger 3 times this summer. We live in the countryside, and there is just the one train station nearby. Since our town is really small, you come to recognize the people who use the station and the faces you see in town, the grocery store, the bank, etc. The town's so small that if someone's friend or family members were visiting, you could spot them out almost instantly. On the train, I would say that there are about 30 average daily commuters who use that station. So if someone looked exactly like your brother, then you'd notice them instantly. So, one day, last summer, I went to see some friends and I had a great time. I took the train back just like always. I got off one of the back carriages and saw someone tall walking quickly up ahead. Ah, it's my bro, I thought. I wanted to go try and catch up with him and speak to him, but he was moving so fast. As usual, I couldn't be bothered to run after him since I was pretty tired. When I got home, I told him that I saw him at the train station. "What are you talking about? I haven't even left the house today," he replied. "We were literally on the same train, bro." "It wasn't me," he said. I didn't know who else it could have been. I swear that was him. I swear I saw him coming off of that train. Anyways, that was my first encounter with my brother's doppelganger. By the time the morning rolled around, I'd forgotten about the whole thing. A week or so went past, and I was coming back into town around lunchtime, and I saw my brother getting off the train again. This time, he wasn't too far away, so I ran over to him to chat. "Ha, same train, huh?" I said as I slapped him on the back and looked up at him. As soon as I slapped him on the back, I felt an intense feeling of unease, like a needle skipping on a record. Something so instantly noticeable as out of place occurred. My discomfort turned to absolute conviction when our eyes met. Even though it looked 100% like him, I knew that it wasn't my brother. I apologized and scarpered off in the direction of home. This is where things get weird and harder to explain. I can't clearly remember his face. This sounds so mad because he looks just like my brother, right? It's like there's a corrupted file in my memory. When I got home, my brother was there, and I looked at him and spoke with him. I didn't get the same uneasy feeling. I saw him again, the doppelganger, not my brother, at the station very soon after. I didn't approach this time, but I knew it was him. I was scared to approach him. It's crazy, it looked so much like my brother, yet I was scared of it. I actually stopped and let the doppelganger walk off. I didn't want it in my eye line. I felt really weird about the whole thing, so I spoke to my dad about it. And to my surprise, he said that he had seen the doppelganger too. He said he had also saw it leaving the train station. During that summer, I felt as if it was some kind of never-ending loop. My dad saw it one more time after this, and he said that instead of walking into town, it was walking towards the woods. After that, we never saw it again. It really makes you think, is there someone out there that looks just like you but is so inherently not you that it's noticeable to others? I find this very disturbing. I think the reason why this troubles me so much was the fact that it was in our neighborhood for such a brief time and seemingly didn't create any issues here. But it must have been here for a reason, right? It torments me that I didn't do more when I saw my brother's doppelganger. Nothing happened yet, but I feel like there's a storm brewing.
How can someone you've never met have memories of meeting you? By u/godlessfrey11. My partner and I are visiting Oakland. It's our first day in town, and we were walking around. We were window shopping and checking out the area when a random man approaches us. "Hey, how's your visit going?" We assumed he was a homeless man, just being kind with us, being from the Midwest. It's probably not hard to tell that we were not from the area. We respond with a generic, "Our day's been fine, thanks. And yours?" I can't remember the exact words said, but after answering, he stated that he met us yesterday. We laughed and said that it wasn't possible. It was our first day in town. "You must have confused us with someone else," he responded. "No, it was you two. You guys gave me an orange and we chatted for a few minutes." That definitely sounds like something we might do, but seriously, we only just got into town, and it definitely wasn't us. The man then proceeded to tell my partner, "You're from Missouri. You were wearing a blue Kansas City t-shirt." He said a couple of other things, but I was in shock, so I don't remember what he said after that. Anyways, this was accurate information. He has that exact shirt, and he wasn't wearing it that day, but it was one that he wore all of the time. We still to this day have no idea what that was, and it makes my head hurt thinking about it.
This happened when I started living alone. Not long after I had just moved in. I think it must have been the first week. I found out that my new apartment was in the path of an oncoming typhoon. That night I had gotten off to sleep all right, but I awoke in the middle of the night to hear the sound of wind and rain lashing my windows. It was so loud. I just couldn't get back to sleep. I was lying there in bed, thinking about nothing in particular, when I heard. It was coming from the front door. It was the doorbell. Who the hell would be ringing the doorbell of my new apartment? I asked myself. I crept downstairs and I took a look through the peephole. There was a person out there. I was freaked out, but I asked, "Who is it?" I could hear the fear in my voice. "Hey, it's me, man." It was my friend, literally my best friend. He was one of the only ones who knew my address. "Why didn't you just tell me you were coming over, man? It's like the middle of the night," I said through the door. I tried to get a look at him, but it was dark and he had his hat pulled down. That didn't matter because we were friends. I mean, it was a little weird, but I've known him for years. Hey, you really did well to get here in this storm, dude. I called out as I started to unlock the door. That was the moment that something dawned on me. Best friend or not, why was he out here, barely talking, and how did he make it here? I could still hear the ferocity of the typhoon against the door. Another odd thing, he didn't have a driver's license. Even if he somehow caught a bus, he would have had to walk for a long while. There were no bus stops nearby. I didn't know the area all that well, but it seemed a bit too late for buses. Besides, who turns up in the middle of the night, during a storm, unannounced? These were all red flags, and I didn't like them. What the hell was this? I brought my eye closer to the peephole. Hey, bud, how did you get here? I asked cautiously. We fell into an awkward silence while the typhoon raged on. I brought my eye closer to the peephole. I wanted to catch a closer look at him. His skin was disturbingly pale. It reminded me of a waxwork skin. His eyes flitted back and forth, as if they were remote controlled. That wasn't my friend. I wasn't even sure that was a human. It was pretending, whatever it was. I didn't let on that I was scared, but I was petrified. I watched that thing out there, which looked like my best friend, stand there and smile inanely, occasionally twitching at the corners of its lips. I had to get away from the door once I saw that. I went into another room and I tried my best to compose myself. I tried to think about what to do next. All the while, that friend thing repeated the same line it delivered earlier, as if it was all it knew, like it was an actor practicing its lines. Hey, it's me, man. I called my friend, the one it was impersonating. He said that it wasn't him. I knew it wasn't him, but I just had to be 100% sure. That thing was very convincing. I went upstairs and went back to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I didn't know how long that thing stayed outside my door, but I heard it occasionally repeating its line. Hey, it's me, man. After a sleepless night, the sun rose and the typhoon subsided. It took a long while for me to get up the confidence to approach the peephole, but when I did, I found that it was gone.
Missing Time in the Abandoned House. Translated by J. Nightmares. About a 30-minute walk from my apartment, there is an old abandoned Japanese-style house. I am quite familiar with this building. On my route to and from high school, when I'm in the mood for a change of scenery, I pass the house. The abandoned house has been there for ages, and there's no nameplate on the house. The garden is overgrown with weeds, and the garage is wide open that you can see that it's filled to the roof with all sorts of garbage. It's a 2-story building. The cracked and broken windows are caked with dirt and years of accumulated dust. Their windows are so clouded up that you cannot see inside. I was never really interested in it. It was just a part of the scenery to me, something to look at on my way home. One day, on my way home from school, as I was passing by that house, I heard something. Some kind of tapping. I thought it might be someone nearby doing some construction work, so I didn't pay it much mind. Then, pretty much the same thing happened to me after about a week. The same tapping sound coming from nearby the abandoned house. I thought, that's weird. The construction work is still ongoing a week later. This was pretty much routine every time I passed the abandoned house for a while. The sound of something tapping or banging, whatever you want to call it. It was weird, but who cares, I thought. Something was repeating itself every time I walked by. like it was a record skipping, or it was stuck on loop. Was it coming from the house? A really strange feeling came over me, and I felt incredibly anxious, but I didn't want to leave. I stood outside staring at the abandoned house. It was obvious that no one lived in that house, but I felt that there was something going on in there. Maybe someone trespassing. I didn't know if I should report it or not. And just as I was considering this, a police officer showed up on a bike. He was pretty young, and I told him about the strange repetitive sounds that I've been hearing. He listened to what I had to say while nodding and making agreeing noises. We didn't hear the tapping sounds though. The police officer said, "Well, I will make a report, but you better head home. It's getting pretty dark." I thought he was just saying that to get rid of me, since I was just a kid. I doubted that he was going to make a report. Then, he paused, perhaps considering the way he just fobbed me off, and said, "Hey, I'll go and check out the house." He unlocked the gate and carefully walked through the weeds. I followed him. We arrived at the front door, and he tried to open it, but it was locked. We walked around looking for another point of entry when we heard the tapping sound starting up again. "Is anyone there?" he called out. We went around the back and found a window open, so then he crept through it. It was dusk and still mildly bright out, and I waited outside for the officer to return. After about 15 minutes, he didn't come back. I was getting freaked out. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. The only response I had was that strange tapping sound. I pulled out my phone and called the police, and shortly after I ended the call, 2 other police officers arrived at the scene. They tried radioing the young officer who went into the house, but they couldn't reach him. It began to get dark, and the police officers wanted to keep me around. I couldn't leave now. They went inside that house, and I was so scared for them. But they returned, and they said no one was inside. Did the young officer leave the house from some other exit? Or has he just disappeared? We left the house that night, not understanding what had happened. It stayed on my mind. After a couple of days, I was still concerned about the young officer, so I went down to the local police station to ask about him. I was fully expecting them to say that he was fine, but when I got there, I saw his photo on the notice board. The words beneath his picture said, "Missing person." I found out from the other 2 officers that the abandoned house had been searched multiple times, but the officer was still unaccounted for, as is the original owner of that house. They told me that they found his hat in there, but no other clue or hint of what happened. I don't know what on earth happened in there. Was the officer spirited away? Was it some glitch in the Matrix? Will he appear somewhere else down the line? Who knows? I still can't believe it happened right in front of me. One thing I feel is certain is that if you ever hear a tapping sound coming from an abandoned building, don't bother investigating it. Update. After 4 months, a 300-man search for the officer has yielded no results.
This happened when I was 24. It was a truly frightening experience. I'm a female, and back in those days I was working in an office. I was living alone in an apartment block. All I used to do was go to work, then come home. Life moved in a monotonous cycle. One day, as I was passing by the front of my local train station, a man called out to me. He was wearing a suit. He looked to be a real ladies' man. It broke up the routine of my mundane life. It was so refreshing to be hit on. Since I had nothing better to do that day, I decided to accept his invitation to go for a drink. But I reminded him that it would just be a drink and nothing more. He was a little older than me. I'd say about 3 years or so. We got on like a house on fire, so after a few dates, he offered me a relationship, and we became a couple. He was very witty and really fun to be around. It was about 2 months into our relationship, and it was the first time I invited him over to spend the night. I bought some alcohol and some snacks since it was a Friday, and I was eagerly awaiting his arrival. We set a time for him to come over, and that time had passed. He hadn't texted to say he was running late or anything. Strange. 1 hour passed, then another, and before long, it was night. I looked out the window into the night sky, wondering what had happened. An abrupt knocking sound came at the door. It was loud enough to make me jump. I wondered if this could be a courier or something. I remembered that I hadn't ordered anything there. Rarely people come to the door without being buzzed into the building. It was weird. I guessed it must be my extremely late boyfriend, so I headed to the door. "Can I come in?" It was his voice, but something told me not to open the door. How did he get to my door without being buzzed in? I can't really say why, but I really didn't want to open the door. "Can I come in?" He asked the same question, despite the fact that I didn't respond. "Can I come in? Can 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 I come in?" It was his voice, but it sounded like it was a recording of his voice, and it sounded like it was being played repeatedly. "Can I come in? Can I come in?" I hated it. I covered my ears. It was just so creepy. I couldn't tell you how long it went on for. All I can remember is when the voice finally stopped. I didn't know what to think. I was in a panic, so I called my boyfriend again and again, but he wouldn't pick up. He never returned any of my calls, and I never saw or heard from him again. I didn't know his address, and I couldn't contact him in any way. I didn't know where he worked or anything about his family. I realized that I barely knew a thing about the man, and that freaked me out a whole lot more. I often wonder about what happened to him and where he is today. Sometimes I wonder if he was even human. It feels like it was just a glitch in the Matrix sometimes. One thing is for certain, I'm really glad I listened to my gut and didn't let it into my apartment.
Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.